Hello, welcome to my channel. Have you ever contemplated or marveled at how different some of the people around you are? If you have, then this video is for you. Because in this video, I'll be talking about what you need to know about the differences in people around you based on an understanding of psychology. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Now, we humans as a species have numerous things in common, like our capacities for learning, language, emotions, memory, etc. Yet, we differ in the way we perceive the world, express ourselves, interact with others, make decisions, etc. And there seems to be all sorts of differences among people in general. Some people always seem happy while others do not seem so. Some people seem loud and aggressive while others seem quiet and soft. Some people tend to be talented at almost everything they do, while others do not seem so talented. And some people seem to get addicted to alcohol, drugs, etc., pretty quickly, while others do not. So it seems that there's a lot of variation within people, assuming that people are healthy and devoid of any mental illness. So, moving outside the realm of any mental illness, there just seems to be a lot of natural variation within people and their brains. Now, this is perplexing, and this question of how and why we are different from one another has always fascinated me. It has nudged me to seek answers from the psychology of human variation. So, what does the psychology of human variation tell us? It tells us that there are two dimensions that are commonly studied in this field that may account for making sense of the differences in people. These are personality and intelligence. And in this video, I'll be focusing on the topic of personality. So I'll be telling about the topic of intelligence in another video. So, what is personality? Personality is defined as a person's style of dealing with the world and other people. It is the way we direct our mental energy, perceive the world, and make decisions. So, how can we scientifically measure and identify personality? Now, throughout the history of psychology, there have been numerous studies and numerous tests that have been made to measure personality. And while some of them have not worked, some of them have stood the test of time and are still practiced today. So, let's look at some of the leading assessment frameworks that are still there today. So, one of them is called the Big Five or the Ocean model, and the other is called the Myers-Briggs or the MBTI model. So, the Big Five, Ocean, and the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI models lead the way. Now, let's start with the Big Five Ocean model. Now, this model is the most reliable and valid test scientifically to measure personality. And as the name Big Five suggests, it says that we have five basic traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, popularly known by the acronym OCEAN. And there's also another acronym for this, which is CANOE, CANOE, but OCEAN is the more popular one. Now, these five traits are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Openness measures how open-minded and curious one is to new experiences and knowledge. Conscientiousness measures how organized and dependable one is. Extroversion measures how one interacts with the external environment of people and objects. Agreeableness measures how one feels towards others. Neuroticism measures how one deals with emotions. Now, these five traits present a personality spectrum with scores of either high, medium, or low on all the traits. So, for example, you could get a medium open, high conscientized, high extroversion, low agreeable, and medium neurotic. So you can get high, medium, or low any of the score on all these traits, and it is observed that these traits are fairly consistent over an individual's lifetime. And Being naturally high or low on any of the traits has both pros and cons. Hence, no trait is superior or inferior to its opposite. So, you have a unique personality, and you shouldn't feel the pressure to be someone who you're not. So, it's always better to stick to your natural strengths. Now, the next model is called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI model. Now, this model is the most popular model used in personality assessment. So, it's a widely used instrument, and it's rooted in psychiatrist C.G. Jung's theory of psychological types. Now, the MBTI has four dichotomies. They are extroversion, introversion. So, the first dichotomy is about the type of world you focus on. Do you tend to focus on the subjective outer world around you, or do you tend to focus on your own subjective inner world? Do you? The first extroversion is about, do you tend to focus on the objective outer world around you? So that's extroversion, and introversion is about the subjective inner world with your thoughts and your feelings. The second dichotomy is sensing intuition. Now, this dichotomy is about your perception. So, uh, do you naturally focus on the basic information you perceive with your five senses? Then you prefer sensing. Or do you naturally focus on interpreting and adding meaning to the information you perceive? That is, you kind of find hidden patterns in everything. If so, you prefer intuition. The third dichotomy is thinking feeling. This dichotomy is about your judgment or decision making. While making decisions, do you naturally look at logic and consistency first? If so, you prefer thinking. Or do you naturally look at people and circumstances first while making decisions? If yes, you prefer feeling. Now, the last dichotomy is the judging perceiving dichotomy. And this is about your structure in the outer world. So, when dealing with the outside world, do you tend to organize and make decisions quickly? If yes, then you prefer judging. Or if you tend to stay open to new information and options and uh, prolong making decisions for as long as possible, then you prefer perceiving. So those were the four dichotomies, and finally, according to your preferences and the interaction of the preferences with one another. So it's not just like that you have a preference in each of the dichotomy, but it is said that these preferences also interact with one another, and then they form your own personality type. So this can be expressed as a code with four letters. So for example, in the first dichotomy, if you prefer extroversion, in the second one, if you prefer intuition, in the third one, if you prefer feeling, and in the fourth one, if you prefer perceiving, then you are an ENFP type. Whereas uh, your preferences remain the same in the first three, but in the last dichotomy, you prefer judging, then you are an ENFJ type. So you can have 4 into 4, which is equals a total of 16 personality types. Thus, there can be 16 personality types. So that was what the basic MBTI was, but it's beneficial to look at Jung's theory of psychological types also when we are learning about the MBTI, because we would appreciate that the MBTI is more nuanced than just four dichotomies, only if we see what Jung's theory is about. So, the full extent of Jung's theory is beyond the scope of this video, and I won't be going into that, but we'll just take a basic look at what it comprises. So, Jung's original theory focuses on four cognitive functions stacked in your conscious mind. These functions are the dominant function, the auxiliary function, the tertiary function, and the inferior function. The combination and order of the cognitive functions is different for each of the 16 types. So what this means is that if you're an INFJ type, your dominant function is introverted intuition, your auxiliary function is extroverted feeling, your tertiary function is introverted thinking, and your inferior function is extroverted sensing. And if you're an INFP, you have introverted feeling, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted thinking, respectively, as the four functions. Now, it was observed that these four functions develop as we age in life, and even though eventually we do develop all the four functions, it is said that the dominant and auxiliary functions will always be the core functions of your conscious personality. In other words, the middle two letters of your four-letter MBTI code make up your core personality. That is, the combination of N and F in the examples of the INFP and the INFJ stated above. Now, just like the Big Five says, the MBTI also says that all preferences and functions have both pros and cons. Hence, all types are equal and have their own strengths and weaknesses. So the message here too, just like the Big Five, is that you have your own personality and which has its own unique strengths, and you should stick to what you naturally are while trying to develop your type. Now, what if we combine the Big Five and the MBTI? Now, this is a very interesting question, and we'll see why. So, you have seen the Big Five is a trait-based theory, while the MBTI is a type-based one. And the Big Five rates more highly on scientific reliability and validity than the MBTI, but the MBTI offers more depth, convenient insights, and a sense of community that the Big Five does, especially when the MBTI is understood through the lens of Jung's theory, as we just saw in the previous slide. And have you noticed that there is some correlation between the traits of the Big Five and the preferences of the MBTI? Now, the overlap of the traits or preferences of extroversion in both the models is quite obvious. But remember the agreeableness and the feeling dimensions? There is an overlap there too, right? Also, there seems to be an intersection of conscientiousness and judging, and of openness and intuition. So, the only facet that seems to be missing from the MBTI is some variant of neuroticism. Now, given all these similarities between the two models and the individual benefits of the both, what if there's a way that we can combine the two and have the best of both worlds? Well, it turns out there is a way to do that, and this is what the website 16 Personalities seem to have done. So, the 16 Personalities model. Now, this website uses a model named NERIS or NERIS, which has its roots in both the MBTI and the Big Five. So, how did they do this? First, they used the letter code format of MBTI, for example, ENFJ, with an extra letter to accommodate 5 scales rather than 4. So, for example, ENFJ-T. So, what is this hyphen T? We'll see in a short while. So it leverages the convenience and type community of the MBTI this way by giving a 4-letter personality type code. And these 5 scales are based on the traits of the Big Five. So these traits are defined like 60% extroverted, 74% feeling, etc. So if you get 60% extroverted on the test, then the remaining 40% is introverted. And 74% feeling means the remaining 26% is thinking. And similarly, you could have maybe 65% intuition and 35% sensing, like that. Thus, this leverages the reliability and validity of the Big Five by incorporating a personality spectrum. In short, it presents the characteristics as named by the MBTI and as defined by the Big Five. So the names given here are similar to what has been given by the MBTI: extraversion, intuition, feeling, and judging. But these characteristics are defined as defined in the Big Five model. So the definitions are the same as extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Now, uh, what about neuroticism? So now, as you might have guessed at this point, the hyphen T, the fifth letter that we just saw, actually corresponds to neuroticism. So the fifth letter after the hyphen has been named turbulence, hyphen T, and this is defined similarly to the Big Five's neuroticism trait. Its opposite characteristic has been named assertiveness, that is hyphen A. Thus, you could be ENFJ-T or ENFJ-A depending on whether you are high neurotic or low neurotic respectively. Now, you can take a free test on 16personalities.com to know your personality type or traits. I took the test and it was fairly consistent with my results of MBTI and Big Five that I had taken a few years ago as part of a class for my MBA. And in case you're curious to know what my type or my traits are, so on the Big Five, I am a high open, medium conscientized, low extrovert, high agreeable, and medium neurotic. On the MBTI, I am an INFP type with dominant introverted feeling and auxiliary extroverted intuition. And on this 16 personalities model, I got INFP-T, which is a turbulent INFP. It seems that this approach, according to what they have mentioned in the website, has allowed them to achieve high test accuracy while also retaining the ability to define and describe distinct personality types. Now we have seen how we are different. So now this brings us to the question of why do we have different personalities? And as I mentioned in the introduction of this presentation, it's interesting to know not just how we are different from one another, but also why we are different. And this question is a bit difficult to answer, but uh, there have been attempts made in this regard. So the answer to why we are different usually has two different possibilities. Can you guess what they are? They are genes and environment. So genes is also called heredity. Now, based on studies, researchers have found that the proportion of variation in personality between two individuals is partly genetic and partly environmental. And in one study, it was found that identical twins raised apart were found to have similar traits, indicating a high influence of genes. Now, identical twins have the same genes, so if they have similar traits, then that means that genes play a high role in the similarity of the personalities of two people. So, don't ask me how this study was done. I mean, were the identical twins kind of brutally separated for this? I mean, that would just have been cruel. But anyway, so it indicates a high influence of genes. Hence, the answer to this difficult question is that it's a mix of the two possibilities. Both genes and environment play a role in shaping our personality. So to conclude this video, I'll mention something that Jung had suggested in his writings. It's that when an individual's core personality is not allowed to be expressed by his or her community or society or whatever external environment he or she is in, it can lead to stress and frustration. Now, stressed and frustrated individuals are helpful to neither themselves nor their environment. Hence, knowing about the psychology of personality is beneficial for understanding yourself as well as others around you. It is a key component of self awareness, growth, compassion, and harmony. Also, the next time you get annoyed at someone or you connect deeply with someone, please consider that it may be due to differences or similarities in your core personalities. Now, this may not always be the case and definitely shouldn't be used as an excuse or reason for someone's bad or good behavior, but understanding personality does play a role in our dealings with others. So I'll leave with this quote from Carl Jung. Individuation is a natural necessity. Its prevention by a leveling down to collective standards is injurious to the vital activity of the individual. So these are my final words, and I hope you liked the video.